Now, for the second textbook, Literacy and Language Diversity in the United States by Wiley, comments. I mentioned that I have some electronic copy if you need to see it. Chapter 2 is the one we're looking at. Chapter 1 is just some general commentary. I like it because it's organized around common myths about literacy and language diversity in the United States. So 6 common misconceptions. Kind of simple. You go through it. The information's a little dated. Now, I've got some websites in there that talk about language, and I'll probably will add another 1 or 2, which you'll want to put in your resource book probably. But common myths. Number 1, the United States is most appropriately described as an English-speaking monolingual nation. Not true. You know, and this is and the date here is 2000, which is, well, there've been a lot of immigration, but there's been a lot of diversity in the immigration since then. Refugees, just think how many refugees have as a result of the collapse of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union. There were Russians and different groups coming to the United States, and we were much more accepting of refugees than we are now. And you can see here it talks about those who speak a language other than English, 46 million. Whereas, and this was people that are older than 5 years of age. If you look at a population of the United States, children 5 years or younger, you'll see that about half, and I believe this is accurate, I remember it, that about half of the school-age kids, or kids are going to be school-age in the United States, at least speak a language other than English. They may speak English and that language, but at least half. That's why in ESL, it's such a great job or a great area to be in, because ESL never stopped. You know, years ago, people told me that if you get an ESL, you don't have to go into a foreign country and like missionaries do. You have to go over there and teach English or teach it for businessmen, because there's no need in the United States. And that was in 1980. And that's when everybody thought, well, you know, it's morning in America, Reagan's president, why would we, you know, ESL's not a big deal, everybody's going to speak English. But the world's never what you think it's going to be. It's always going to be changing. Predictions are, you know, Nostradamus didn't know anything. I think I'm going to make my own predictions. So the United States is not a monolithic English-speaking country. And I'm going to send you some more information on that, but you can Google languages spoken in the United States. You're going to see some incredible stuff. They give examples here of how the change has been over the last so many years, but that's mainly in the late 20th century, which is a ways back now. We're almost to 2020. In different states, how many people in California in 2000 spoke a second language? 39%. New Mexico, 37%. Michigan, 8.4%. Nebraska was 7.9%, but that's probably changed now. I found out something interesting. Some of you will know this because you work with a group, but a group called the Karen, Karen, a group of refugees from Myanmar, which used to be Burma. French Siam was another name. They fled from there, and that's the second most common non-English language in Nebraska. And there are 3,000 or 4,000 members, refugees from that country. Spanish, obviously, is the first, but there are a fair number of Arabic speakers here. So, and there are a lot of bilingual speakers. In fact, dual language, I just mentioned dual language in my other video, is a highly prized skill. So you can go through and look at this, and you'll see West Virginia is not near very diverse even now. But you don't have to go to California, Mexico, or Texas to find diversity. You can look in places like Nebraska. Michigan, Tennessee, a lot of diversity there, or the North Carolina. Myth number 2, the predominance of English and English literacy is threatened. Now, this is a very serious issue. Are we in danger of our language dying? We know that's true of Native Americans. There's some Native American tribes where maybe there's only 2 people left that even speak the language. Is that true with us? No. English is the dominant language. It's the language of entertainment. Spanish certainly has its own channels and entertainment, some others. But English is the language of television. It's, you know, not that's recommended, but English is not a threat. But you'll see in people's fears that they're afraid that English is going to disappear. You know what I'm afraid of is that English as a literate reading, that I worry about. That's with English speakers. And people don't read. That's the problem. People don't read. Not that they don't speak English or some variety of English, but they don't read. And that does affect the capability of you. And that's why it's great if you get a student, they can read in Spanish and they come to you and they don't know English, but they know how to read. So reading is not complicated. They just simply apply the skills of reading. And it's still going left to right. It's nothing too dramatic. And there's some cultures are right to left in their reading. Myth number 3, English literacy is the only literacy worth noting. That would be saying that nothing of value exists in other cultures and other languages. French literature, Spanish literature, Puerto Rican literature, Jewish literature, Native American language and literature. To say that only English has anything of value, it's absurd. You may have translations of German or many people historically would say German is the most valuable for science and technology, French for literature, English for business, you know, but we know that Russian's valuable. We know that literature teaches us higher level skills and stimulates our minds to think, to think critically and logically. English illiteracy is high because language minorities are not as eager to learn English and assimilate as prior generations are. This is often an accusation. Well, they don't want to learn English. They're refusing to learn English. Given an opportunity to learn English or to learn to read, most people do not turn away from it. Now, it depends on how you teach it. If you teach reading in a way that makes it incredibly unpleasant, and I know some ways that's done, then of course you're going to find a problem. But reading is a natural extension of our curiosity. At least I believe it is. And I think reading teachers, and it's how we learn stories and explore, because we can't go everywhere or listen to somebody tell us wonderful stories. Sometimes we have to read them from books. That's why I'm a big proponent of multicultural literature. You know, read about African tales. The great stories of literature are not written in English. They're written in Greek and Latin, and then they were in French. The stories of King Arthur were written in an old form of almost Germanic or Old English. What was the one, Old English, Beowulf. All the stuff you studied in literature you probably don't remember. Don Quixote was written in Spanish, first great novel. So all these adventure stories were not written in English. They're from other cultures. And so when someone comes in and they say, oh, we're going to lose our language, or nobody wants to learn English, hopefully you've got an attitude of promoting language study. Many language minority adults favor English-only policies. That's actually sometimes is true, depends on who you talk to, but people assume it and shouldn't. And then the argument here is that if you are Hispanic, if you have contact with Spanish culture, Mexican culture, Guatemalan culture, whatever, Peruvian, shouldn't you want to have your students know about that? Culture is both very easily threatened, a very delicate concept, a very mysterious concept. And our culture is in our language. You wouldn't want your language to be wiped out. I can understand the fear, but it's not going to happen to English. But if you're a native speaker of Arapaho and there's only 20 people alive that know Arapaho or can even tell the stories in Arapaho, your language is at extreme risk. You're 20 lives away from losing it. You know, there's some sayings that when the last speaker or when the oldest people are still speak the language, but nobody wants to learn it, then everything about that culture, everything it has had for eons of time, for thousands of years, all the concepts, all the beliefs, all the sentiments, all the color, the imagination, all of that is at risk, you know. So you probably know that if you've ever worked with Omaha or different groups. There's some native tribes that are literally down to one person who speaks the language. And that frightens me. That's just like saying there's a certain type of a beautiful bird somewhere and the last one was seen a year ago. We don't know if they even exist anymore. Extinction of an animal, extinction of, you know, life. That's what language is. Number 6, and the final one, the best way to promote English literacy is to immerse language minority children and adults in English-only instruction. Well, I don't believe that. And when you immerse people, you drown some of them. Remember that. Heard the old expression, well, if you're going to learn to swim, just throw them in the pond. Yeah, and about a third of the kids won't come out of the pond. So I think you're a murderer, okay? That would be child abuse. Or it's the same way if I want you to learn Chinese, I could take you over to China and just leave you there with no, you know, you're just in Chinese, everything's Chinese. First of all, the stress would be tremendous on you. You wouldn't have any structure. Because even if you want to learn Spanish, it's good to have sometimes a Spanish English speaker who will introduce you to basic concepts and to get you comfortable with the language. My old Spanish teacher taught us 50 expressions in Spanish so that our first month we could say things like "Tiene pulgas?" Do you have fleas? Or "Como es, what is it? I hope your cold's getting better, something like, que se mejore pronto, you know, tiene catarro, do you have a cold? A catarrh, I think they called it, it's kind of a cough. It's an old term in English, but we don't use it anymore. But the idea is that I give you some kind of a gentle introduction to French or Spanish or German or Russian or whatever, Chinese, and then I give you some basic expressions so you can have some success in the language and you won't be terrified. Now, there is a thing called the Berlitz method, which is you go in the class and right from the start, it's all that language, it's immersion. But that doesn't work with all learners. Sometimes it's very stressful because when you hear someone speaking in another language and you don't understand it, you shut down. Quite often you shut down rather than study and try to figure out something. So a teacher has to give you something to hold on to. You don't throw people in the pond. You don't throw them in the class where they don't have a chance. It's very frustrating. They talk in here about the example of Sequoyah, who developed the Cherokee syllabary, which is the language of the Cherokee, so that this was in Oklahoma. He actually published books and papers in the Cherokee language. and promoted it. And they may even in the 1850s, 90% of the Cherokee could read their language, because one advantage they did have from European context, they had printing presses and they had a way to reproduce, and then they could look at newspapers and they could read books and they could write stories and things. Okay. And deculturization destroyed that and caused a lot of damage to the Cherokee culture because they were prevented from using their language. So that's all, for this chapter. Those 6 areas are why I want you to read the chapter. And if you need a copy, or you need to email me if you have a problem or you don't have the book. So let me know, okay? All right, thank you, and I hope this has been helpful. I may add another video during the week just to watch. I hope you don't mind. I don't really like to just sit here and dump a ton of things on you on Sunday and say, do all this as fast as possible. I do see this as a real class where you work, every couple of days and look at stuff. I want you to learn. I'm not doing a correspondence course where I just dump some stuff on you. Here's the other little aspect of this. I would like you this week, you don't have to, I would like you to email and ask me questions. I very much enjoy that. You can even call me. I gave you my phone number. You can even Zoom me. This is how I'm recording these. So thank you. And I did put up the discussion so you can get to work on your map. And by the way, on the map, you can take a picture of it with your phone and put it out so we can all look at your cultural map of your town.